بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه صدق الله العظيم. As it was announced before also that inshallah today's session will be devoted for the month of Ramadan. We'll be talking about things to do during the month of Ramadan, or do's and don'ts of the month of Ramadan. And of course that will be limited to the main points. We cannot go into all the details of it, just like we cannot talk about the details of Salah in one session. Same way we cannot talk about the details of fasting, Ramadan, I'tikaf, Salah, Salat al-Taraweeh, Tahajjud, all in one session. But inshallah we will try to cover the important points about these things. As far as the importance of the month of Ramadan, we all know it, and there are many ayahs of Al-Quran Al-Kareem about it, many ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that talk in detail about it. For example, there is a hadith in Sahih Al-Bukhari. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Man sama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaban ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbih." Whoever will fast during the month of Ramadan under the two conditions. One is he has iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is must for all the ibadahs. And the second is ihtisaban, hoping to get the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means the person corrects his intention before starting the fasting. غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. All of his previous sins will be forgiven. Which is of course a great virtue, that all the sins will be forgiven by fasting these 29 or 30 days. In another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, "As-siyamu junnah." Fast are shield. So fasting really is a protection against the evils, against the fitnas, against shaitan al-rajim, against the fitna of shaitan. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is telling us, "As-siyamu junnah." Fasting is a shield. But there are certain things that will break this shield. And therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam advises us in the same hadith, which is in Sahih Al-Bukhari, that when a person is fasting, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ, he should not talk of any intimate relationship, any sexual desires. وَلَا يَجْهَلْ, and the person should not fight, argue, and get in these type of disagreements where there is any type of argument or fighting is involved. وَإِنْ إِمْرَأٌ قَاتَلَ, if a person tries to argue with him or fight with him, أَوْ شَاتَمَ, a person tries to curse at him, instead of replying to that person, he should say, إِنِّي صَائِمٌ, I'm fasting. So therefore I cannot argue back with you. I cannot fight with you. I'm fasting. In fact, really is a beautiful way of reminding the other person, especially during the month of Ramadan, that we know that everyone is fasting, and a person gets upset, starts cursing at someone else. If we just tell him at that time that I'm fasting, in other words, you are telling him that what you are doing at this time is against fasting. And since you are fasting, you better stop doing this also. Really, these are the things that will, of course, not break the fast, but take all the importance, reward, and the effect of the fast away from the person. Remember, the main thing in the ibadahs is not the physical outlook of the ibadah. The main thing in the ibadah is the real spirit of the ibadah and the effect of the ibadah. But of course, the physical outlook of the ibadah has to be kept the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us without making any changes into it. But with that, we need to get the effect of the ibadah on ourselves and have the impact of those type of services that we perform for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on our lives. Otherwise, it's just an action that means nothing, just like other religions have some of their dogmas, they have some of their ways that they consider it way of worship. When they get together in their churches, synagogues, or temples, you see them performing so many things. There is no spirit behind those things. There is no value behind those things. There is no effect behind those things. So the main thing in all the ibadahs is the effect of the ibadah. And the effect of the ibadah comes by, number one, making sure that all the ibadah that we are performing is only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number two, not doing anything that will hurt the effect of the ibadah. Remember, there are two different things. One is there are things that will affect the existence of the ibadah. That will affect the existence of the ibadah. What is fasting? Fasting has three things. Number one, stop from eating. Number two, stop from drinking. Number three, stop from having intimate relationship. These are the three things that fall into the definition of fasting. So outlook of the ibadah is a person has to stop doing these three things. As soon as the person will do any of these three things, that person have broke his fast because he went against the definition of fasting. Except, of course, we know about eating and drinking. If the person would do it by mistake, not by mistake, I should say, if the person will do it forgetfully, then his fast does not break. So that's the outlook of the ibadah. And the ibadah will break, this ibadah that is called fasting will break by either eating, number two, drinking, or having intimate relationship. But as these things will break the ibadah itself and the outlook of the ibadah, same thing, any type of sin, backbiting, fighting, arguing, cursing, lying, all of these things will break the effect of the ibadah. And this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reminding us in this hadith, which is in Sahih al-Bukhari, that as-sawmu junnah, fasting is a shield. Shield against what? Against the shaitan al-rajim. If a person in his normal day-to-day life will have his schedule such, especially in these days, if our schedule is such that we have breakfast before we leave home, and a person has to leave home early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then he gets his dinner only after he comes back from work, and that is about 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. So the person, in other words, is just like fasting. He's spending the time from dawn to sunset without eating and drinking and having intimate relationship. So it just looks like a fasting. But that stopping from these things will not give him the effect of the fasting. The reason is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, ihtisaban. The person has to have his intention. And he has to do the intention, have the intention that I'm doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once he will have that intention, then he has to stop doing the other things also that will break the effect of the fast. So this is a very important point that many times we do not keep in mind at the time of performing an ibadah. For example, a person comes to perform the salah. One is the outlook of the salah, that is Allahu Akbar, reciting Quran, Thana, Quran, Ruku', Sujood, Tashahud, Salam, all of these things. This is the outlook of the salah. Once the person have done all of these things, we will tell him that your salah is good. But the person was not concentrating in his salah. He was thinking about something else in his salah. So as long as he did not do anything that will break his salah, we will tell him your salah looked okay and it should be good. So the outlook of the salah was good, but the spirit of the salah is not there. The effect of the salah is not there. Now this is not the type of salah about which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. It will prevent him from doing evils and from doing shameful actions. The reason is the main spirit of the salah was missing and the effect of the salah was not there. So same thing with our ibadah. So even with our fasting, we have to make sure we keep the effect of the fasting. And keeping the effect of the fasting is this is what, how to keep it. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is teaching us that same thing in this hadith, which is in Sahih al-Bukhari. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "As-sawmu junnah." Fasting is a shield. And when a person is fasting, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ, he should not talk about intimate relationship. وَلَا يَجْهَلْ, he should not get involved into fights and arguments. And this is a very important point also to remember in Quran and Hadith. And even in Arabic language generally, the word for arguments and for fighting normally that is used is jahl. Wala yajhal, normally, literally jahl means to be ignorant. In other words, getting involved in these type of cursing, fighting, arguments is all jahl, is all ignorance. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, wala yajhal, and the person should not be ignorant, which means he should not get involved into fighting, arguments, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another ayah of Quran al-Kareem, وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. When a jahil talks to him, which means a person tries to argue with him or tries to curse at him, he says, salama, peace. Assalamu alaikum. I don't want to argue. So the word jahl is used for arguments and fights in Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, وَإِنْ امْرَأٌ قَاتَلَ, if a person tries to argue with him, أَوْ شَاتَمَ, a person tries to fight with him or argue with him, curse at him, he should say, إِنِّي صَائِم, I'm fasting. So therefore, I cannot do it now. Another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لَخَلُوفُ فَمِ الصَّائِمِ أطيب عند الله من ريح المسك. The smell that comes from the mouth of a fasting person is dearer to Allah than the fragrance of a musk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that smell. The reason is the person stopped eating and drinking for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in appreciation to that, He loves even the smell that comes from the mouth of the fasting person. And there are many other virtues in the hadith, but I'm sure many of you know many other hadiths about the virtues and know the ayahs, and at least we all know the importance of fasting, at least during the month of Ramadan. And nevertheless, we know it is one of the pillars of Islam and is farida, just like any other faraid of Islam. So therefore, there cannot be any doubt about fasting, about keeping the fast, or there cannot even be a second thought whether we should fast or not. That's something we have to do it. As Muslims, we have to do it. There is no second opinion about it, and then no one can give it a second thought. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in the hadith. In fact, Sahaba ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in narrate this, that fasting went through 3 different stages. There were 3 major changes were made into fasting in Islam. The first major change was made that in the beginning of Islam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to fast Ashura. The fasting of Ashura was fard, and he also used to fast 3 days of every month, 13th, 14th, and 15th. Then when the fasting of the month of Ramadan became fard, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, now the fasting of Ashura has been abrogated. So therefore, we do not have to fast for Ashura, which simply means from there on, fasting of Ashura became nafil and fasting of Ramadan became fard. Before that, fasting of Ashura was fard. The second major change, in the beginning of Islam, the order was, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. Even those who can afford to fast, if they decide